Hi, thanks for joining us. In this video, we will go through a quick overview of Timbr's SQL Editor component. The SQL Editor is the SQL interface of the platform. Here, we can query the data sources or the virtual knowledge graphs. We can also use the SQL Editor to create, change, or delete concepts, mappings, or views using SQL queries. So let's jump in. To enter the SQL Editor, we'll click on the SQL Lab tab and choose the SQL Editor. It's worth noting that users can easily search through query history by clicking on Query Search, as well as view saved queries by clicking on Saved Queries. So let's continue to the SQL Editor. The first and main thing we see is the query box in the middle. This is where we can write and run our queries. As you can see, this query box is within a query tab that we can rename or close by clicking on the arrow. Next to it, there's the plus sign, which opens a new query tab. In each tab, we need to choose the knowledge graph we want to access, the data source we want to query, and select the schema and table to see the metadata. There are two main things to mention about these dropdowns. First is that choosing the knowledge graph and data source is mandatory. We can't query concepts of a knowledge graph that is not chosen in the first dropdown. Additionally, in a case where we connected multiple data sources to a knowledge graph, we can either be selective on the source we fetch data from, or we can choose Timbr virtualization to perform a query across multiple data sources. The second important thing to mention about these dropdowns is that we don't need to select a schema and table when we want to query. The only reason to select a schema and a table or a concept is to see the metadata, making it easier to build our query. The schema dropdown exposes all the schemas that the Timbr platform has access to from the chosen data source. Additionally, for every knowledge graph, Timbr automatically generates virtual schemas. So let's quickly review these schemas. The first schema is Timbr, which exposes the knowledge graph concepts as virtual tables. The second, and usually the most used schema, is the dTimbr schema, which acts as a denormalized schema, exposing the concepts with their relationships according to our knowledge graph. Next, we have the eTimbr schema, which is an exhaustive schema allowing us to query all the properties in a given hierarchy. Next, there's the vTimbr schema, which exposes the virtual views we create on top of the knowledge graph. Lastly, we have the gTimbr schema, which exposes the out-of-the-box graph algorithms we can run on our data in Timbr. Finally, the fourth dropdown lets us choose a table from our schema to query, or in our case, a concept from our knowledge graph. To highlight the difference between the Timbr and dTimbr schemas, let's quickly open the same concept using both schemas. So let's choose the churn prediction concept using the Timbr schema. As you can see, once a concept or a table is chosen, the side panel opens, showing us the concept or table's information. In the side panel, we can choose to copy the full path of the table or concept, we can copy the full query of the concept, or we can close the concept's metadata. In this example, we can clearly see the properties belonging to the concept churn prediction that can be queried. Now, let's open the same concept using the dTimbr schema. We can now see not only the properties of the concept, but additionally, we can access the relationships of this concept below by clicking on the relationship. So let's click on the of customer relationship, and now we can simply access the customer concept's properties. We'll copy the property we want to add to our query and paste it into the query box. When pasting, we can see the syntax of these properties, which begin with the relationship name. Next to it in the square brackets, we have the target concept we want to access, and after that, we have the property that we want to fetch. Timbr uses these relationships and joins the data automatically according to the relationship we would like to use. It's important to mention that Timbr exposes these relationships as virtual columns of the concept. Taking this to the next level, we can also perform graph traversals by using the relationship as a bridge to another concept. To do so, we will simply scroll down in the metadata panel and open the relationships of the target concept, in this case, has account. Now, we can copy the property from the customer account concept and paste it into the query. As you can see, we get the full path from our main concept, leading through to the related concept, all the way up to the chosen concept. For more information about this, you can explore our YouTube channel and find a video highlighting the usage of relationships in the graph. For convenience, when there are many properties to a concept or columns in a table that are being queried, we can use the search bar to search for specific properties or columns. In addition, if we'd like to make more room for the metadata on the right or for the query box on the left, we can collapse and expand it by clicking on the arrow, or manually drag the toolbar to the position we'd like. The same goes for the ability to drag the bottom of the query box and expand it, perhaps when we are working on a longer query or want to see the results better. Below the query box, we can find different buttons and functions such as Run Query and Download, in case we want to download the results set as a CSV, Limit, which allows us to define a limit for our results, Timeout, which allows us to set a specific amount of time for the query to run before it times out, Save, which allows us to either save the query, map the query to a concept in our knowledge graph, or save the query as a view. Next, we have Import to SQL, which allows us to upload a CSV file to be converted into an SQL query. Next to that, we have Explain Query, which allows us to debug our query and see what was the SQL query that Timbr pushed down to the database. Next to Explain, we have the keyboard logo, which contains keyboard shortcuts as well as code snippets for faster and easier use. To the right of the line, we have Parameters, which enables us to enter different parameters we'd like to define in our queries. Finally, at the bottom, we have the Results box. This is where the results of our queries will appear after running our query. We can scroll down and see the results. We can click on any column header to filter our results by ascending or descending order. We can also choose to hide columns we're not interested to see, or freeze and unfreeze columns. We can also drag columns to put them one next to the other, or adjust the width of the column. To the right, above the results, we can search and filter through the results to find specific things we're interested in. Next to search, we have Hide or Show, which allows us to customize the columns and choose which columns to show and which columns to hide. We can also click Explore and move to the Chart Builder to visualize the results in Timbr's built-in BI module. Finally, we can click on More for additional options such as exporting our results to CSV, viewing our results and query statistics, copying our results to our clipboard, or choosing to show our column statistics, which present the metrics of each column. Aside from the presented results, we can also switch between the Results and Query History tab to view all the queries that we ran previously, allowing us to easily access and reuse them with a click of a button. And that's it. That wraps up our overview of the SQL Editor. I invite you to explore additional videos on our channel and reach out to us if you have any questions at all. I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in our next videos. Thanks for watching and have a great day.